from our ancestors. My people, my mission is simple. It is on the ends of old ropes that new ones are woven. And so, when a man is sure of his footing, he dares life to bring on its worth. Blood and toil of our fathers, the sweat of our mothers. Welcome to this place where we offer green, some freshness, and some good breath. And so when we beat our drums, it is not for war this time, my people. When we beat our drums, it is a summoning of the entire clan. Show up and make sure your name is heard. Make sure and ensure that you pass this rhythm down to generations yet to enter the thoughts of time, that a time in history came where we took an about turn and said that we will be Alpha, call us Omega, call us whichever label. We cannot be suppressed. Can we have another discussion for another day? We are waiting for trained hands of leadership. We choose to call midwives who will place us in fantastic incubators, call it leadership, who will take us to that promised land. This is the promised land. My people, welcome home. And so when a man is guilty of something that is wrong, we name his name and then we beat it on the gongs. When one is guilty of something great, my people, it is only proper that we name and hail. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the center of the world. I came with respect to the Creator, with respect to our kings, to name a man who has rallied all of us and said, come, let us reason together and take our destinies into our own hands. Thank you for the work you have done. Your Excellency, pardon me to come down. I come down because I am simply a child who is learning the steps of our elders. Of what use is a son who cannot interpret his own father's dance? And a child is not held in contempt for calling his father's oath out of 10. Your Excellency, when a king sits in a palanquin and throws his hands about and it remains on the ground, he is simply lying to himself and tickling himself with all the dreams he hopes to have. But when his people go on their knees and they pick him up, when he throws his hands about, beats them on his chest, shows them up to heaven, he is truly master of all that he surveys. Out of palanquins and skins, you choose not to have either. Your Excellency, I do not reduce your rank. The world is here, and you are willing to listen to the dream you had that made you summon the clan and everybody has shown up. If you rise gently, may earth receive you in good stead. Your Excellency, when you take your first steps, let it be history, for it is the most difficult thing, my people, placing one foot in front of the other. That is the only way the old woman will conquer the summit of the mountain. Your Excellency, the world is ready to listen. Tell them something about Sonyo, and then tell them something about St. James they might never have thought about. Tell them the Atlantic is now a playground where we trade fantastic ideas. We are no longer bound by fetters on our hands or even on our minds, and so it's a bead and a watch. My people, it's about time we rub our culture in the face of the world. It says we are one big body that cannot be broken by shackles, by language, by metals. The good matter is short. This one has yet to start from the beginning. Your Excellency, until you rise, I will not leave. And when you rise, I will lead you gently to the place where you will offer word and the world will listen. I wait, sir. Please hold your place. Do not sit until first word is broken.
Let me ask you a question, not as president, but as a student of history. Have you ever wondered why the story of Ghana never included the story of the diaspora? When telling the story of Ghana, many are inclined to begin in 1821 with the formation of the British-ruled Gold Coast colony. But that's inaccurate, because the collective story of our people the many ethnic groups that populate this country, Ghana, predates the existence of any colony on this African continent. Similarly, when speaking the place on this soil, many are inclined to end our story on the shores of this nation, where our ancestors, and I do mean that word literally because they were our blood and bone that were forced onto ships and transported across the Atlantic. But why do these events that follow cease to be part of Ghana's story also? Between the 16th and 19th centuries, nearly 13 million African men, women, and children were captured and transported on ships through the Middle Passage. Over 2 million of them died, some because of the harsh conditions, and others because of disease. But there were also those who chose to end it all by jumping overboard. And there were also the ships that sank in storms on the Atlantic, taking with them our forebears who were shackled and chained limb to limb, turning the Gulf of Guinea and the waters of the Atlantic beyond it into a graveyard of our ancestors. Ghana contains more slave forts and castles than any other nation on the African continent. Indeed, over 70 of them, with many still intact, but there are others that lie in ruins today. People who were captured in other areas of the sub-region were marched on foot to one of the forts or castles on Ghana's coast, where they were kept, usually in dungeons, until it was time for them to be loaded as cargo onto ships. Given all this, it will be safe to assume that a significant percentage of the enslaved people, even if they did not originate from the area that is now called Ghana, passed through it on their way to the slave destinations. What followed for each and every one of those individuals is as much a part of Ghana's story as what followed for us who remained firmly rooted here on our soil, but were subjugated and rendered second-class citizens nonetheless through colonization. As Kendrick says, bear with me for a second and let me put you on the game. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to land on our shores. They began the practice of extraction of gold, copper, ivory, chili peppers, and then eventually they moved on to the extraction of human beings. It was the Portuguese who gave the river Volta its name. Volta in Portuguese means to return. They used the river Volta as a kind of boundary. It was the farthest they could travel. Once there, they had to turn around and begin their return. The Portuguese, who were superb shipwrights and navigators, therefore called Volta do Mar, which literally translates as return from the sea. but can also be taken as a turn of the sea. With Volta, Domar, they reversed the course of their ships, using the winds from the currents created by the North Atlantic gyre to carry them faster without encountering rough waters. The point at which the river Volta empties into the Gulf of Guinea is part of the Atlantic Ocean. It is called the estuary of the Volta at Adanfoan. For those of you who have not yet had the pleasure of visiting Adan, it is a small coastal town a little over 100 kilometers away from Accra. I've spent some of my most peaceful moments there. I've enjoyed the tranquil river until where it meets the choppy, aggressive waters of the Atlantic Ocean. For years, I did not know the history of these two bodies of water. When I found out, I was stunned. And every time I think about it, I'm still shaken by the cruel irony that even as our people who were enslaved were being forced to walk through the door of no return, their captors had already ensured their own safe return and even memorialized their method of achieving it by lending its name to a river. The Ghanaian-American author Yajesi wrote in her novel, Homegoing, "We believe the one who has power is the one who gets to write the story. So when you study history, you must ask yourself, whose story am I missing? Whose voice was suppressed? So that this voice can come forth. Once you have figured that out, you must find that story too as part of the narrative. By finding and owning the stories of our past, the ones that have been suppressed, we're able to truly know ourselves. And with that knowledge of self comes the power to write ourselves truthfully, respectfully, into not only our future, but the future of all humanity. That's right, by reclaiming everything that was ours. Your Excellency for Esozima Yasimbe, Chairman of the Council of the Republic of Togo, Your Royal Majesties, traditional leaders, Chairman of the Council of State, our senior government officials, members of the diplomatic corps, our brothers and sisters from our 17th region, the African diaspora, I say a very warm welcome to you. Welcome home. This is your home. The reason I believe it is important that we begin to consciously carry the story of the diaspora as part and parcel of Ghana's story is because what divides us ultimately, what denies us the ability to be whole, is that division. And that's precisely why it's the perfect way to conquer. We have to stop drawing those lines of demarcation that say, I end here and you begin there. Yes. I look into the audience and I can see myself in so many of your faces. And I'm sure that I'll be able to see my children in the faces of your children. And so how can I turn my back on the fact that we are undeniably, inextricably part of each other? And yet, we have been divided with artificial borders of colonialism that split ethnic homelands right down the middle, with half of our communities being ruled by one European country and the other half being ruled by another. And with the labeling of our ethnicity in a colony as intellectual and worthy of education, while another ethnicity was said to be inherently martial and thus intellectually inferior. We've been divided by the manufacturing of coups, armed conflicts, anti-poverty programs that somehow never eradicate poverty, by the selective broadcast of stereotypes, a systemic war of images waged against us, images meant to foster fear and engender self-hatred and portrayal of Africans as primitive savages whose low cognitive ability makes them incapable of self-determination, and Black people in the Americas as lazy, drug-addled, and criminally inclined. And there too is the institutionalization of colorism. Yes. The belief that anything Black is negative, yes, or inferior, and the proximity to whiteness is more desirable. Yes. It is reflected in every aspect of our lives. And I say us because colonization did not leave us unscathed, quite the opposite. In English, everything negative and evil is Black. Yes. In Spanish, la negra means Black woman. Tener la negra means to have bad luck or to be jinxed. A once popular French expression that went out of vogue but has recently been making a comeback is travailler comme un nègre. Travailler comme un nègre, which means to work like a slave. And it's often also translated with the word slave being replaced by a more offensive racial slur. But anything in this life, once stripped of its power, will no longer work. And that is true of slurs, it is true of stories, especially ones that are complete fabrications. Let's take the narrative of those who oppressed us and work it. In fact, let's take their entire modus operandi, flip it and reverse it. So I urge you, my brothers and sisters, let's be more intentional about our unity than they were about our division. Yes. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, our brothers and sisters from the 17th region of Ghana, it will not be a difficult goal to achieve. No matter how we've been divided, we've always tried to find our way back to one another. Africans in the diaspora whose forebears were enslaved have kept us in their rhythms. The music they play, the dances, the cadence of their speech, and even the language. The Gula Geechee people of the United States still count using Fulani words instead of numerals. Yoruba language is spoken in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Brazil, Haiti, and Trinidad and Tobago. Likewise, a Creole offspring of Akan is spoken by the Africans, the Maroons in Jamaica and in Suriname. And Africa remains in our food. American gumbo and Brazilian caruru bear a strong resemblance to Ghanaian okra stew. All three use okro, also known as okra, which is native to the African continent and was transported to the New World on slave ships, as were cowpeas. We call it gobe here in Ghana. For those of you, try and eat gobe before you go back. Another food item that is native to Africa, which would explain why some variations of hopping john, a dish from the Gula Dichi people, are so reminiscent of the Ghanaian wache. Try to eat wache too before you go. The ways in which Africa has remained at the heart of its diaspora are far-reaching, well beyond food and music. Perhaps the most important way is in the cultural elements that are taught to our children, ensuring the cord that has tethered these diasporan communities to the African continent all these centuries remains unbroken. They are the Kwekua Nancy folk tales that so many of us in this room grew up hearing and reading, and that have spread all over the world to places too numerous to mention. Just like the popular children's call and response folk song that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Cheche Kule, Cheche Kofisa, Kofisa Langa, Kakati Langa, Kum Adede, I didn't hear you. Cheche Kule, Cheche Kule, Kofisa Langa, Kofisa Langa, Lalati Langa, Kum Adede. Thank you. Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, said, and that quote has been shown here, "I'm not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me." Though I have no proof, I suspect that this sentiment was heavily influenced by his time in America, where he completed his undergraduate studies at Lincoln University and his graduate studies at the University of Pennsylvania. He was also a frequent visitor to Harlem, and this was in the late 1930s and 1940s, at a time when most Ghanaian intellectuals were completing their higher education in European universities. During his 8 years in the United States, Nkrumah was able to experience at first hand racism and the Jim Crow laws. Nkrumah was already a believer in Pan-Africanism before he went to the United States. He was a huge fan of Marcus Garvey, whose Black Star Line was an attempt to facilitate movement between North America and Africa, particularly Liberia, where free blacks had been emigrating since the 1820s. The Black Star, which is featured prominently on between other newly independent African nations. There was a sense of hope. There was a sense of hope. No, it was more than that. It was an intoxicating feeling of endless possibilities. It was a pure, perhaps naive belief that we could attain our own modern day version of the glory that our forebears like Shaka the Zulu and Mansa Musa had, and that we could build our nation states to be as exemplary the coup d'etats, many inspired by the imperial nations, not just in Ghana, but in most of the newly gained independence. And then came even more coup d'etats, one after the other, following by the imprisonment and exile of our liberation leaders. We now know as Ghanaians, as author Ama Atai, powerful forces undermining. We suffered decades of brain drain that emptied a sizable portion of the continent's population, adding scores of exiles to the diaspora. Barely